Have you ever paused, truly paused, to consider the deeper meaning behind your height? At first glance, it might sound like something trivial. A number on your driver's license, a figure recorded in centimeters or inches, a detail we might mention in a casual conversation or jot down on a medical form. Rarely something we question, let alone explore. But what if we told you that your height, this seemingly static and surface-level attribute, holds within it a quiet key to understanding your inner world? To the average observer, height is biology. To society, it's aesthetics. But to Carl Jung, one of the most profound minds in depth psychology, the body, and by extension its shape, its stature, its way of being, was never just biological. He believed that the body is a mirror of the psyche, that even its most objective features are influenced by and expressive of deeper symbolic energies. According to Jung, our physical form, far from being random, is infused with archetypal significance. This is where we begin our journey, not with superstition, not with fortune-telling, but with a psychological lens, a symbolic understanding of the human form that allows us to recognize the subtle, often unconscious energies at work in our personalities, our relationships, and even our spiritual journeys. In this lens, your height isn't just a measurement, it's a message, a gateway, a quiet echo of the archetypes you carry. This isn't about being boxed in by labels or stereotypes. This is about using symbolic tools to better understand your own story. Because once you start to engage Jung's ideas of archetypes, the collective unconscious, and the interplay between psyche and soma, body, it no longer feels like a stretch to ask, what does your height reveal about your essence? And that's exactly what we're about to explore, a world shaped by archetypes. To understand how height fits into Jung's symbolic worldview, we first need to grasp one of his core insights, that the psyche and the world are shaped by archetypes, universal, timeless patterns that we see echoed in myths, dreams, religions, and personal narratives across every culture. These archetypes are not concrete personalities, but energetic blueprints, forces that shape how we see, feel, relate, and become. Jung believed that these archetypes live in the collective unconscious, a vast storehouse of symbolic knowledge shared by all of humanity. They manifest not only in our behaviors and emotions, but also in the bodies we inhabit. Just as a storm reflects archetypal chaos, or spring reflects rebirth, Jung believed that our physical form, our height, weight, posture, gestures can reflect deep psychic truths. The tall tree reaching for the heavens, the rooted oak standing firm and close to the earth, the mountain, the river, the flame, all natural forms carry symbolic power, and so do we. In this light, height becomes archetypal. It's not merely about standing tall or small in physical terms. It's about how we stand in the world, how we're perceived, and how we experience life from that unique vantage point. Whether towering, grounded, or somewhere in between, our stature is a symbol of how we carry ourselves psychologically and what roles we unconsciously step into. So what might it mean, symbolically, to be tall, average, or short? Let's begin to unpack this, not with assumptions, but with archetypal inquiry. And let's start by recognizing a critical truth in Jungian thinking: the body is not neutral. It's a carrier of meaning, a storyteller, a mirror of our deepest patterns. Height as an archetypal gateway. Imagine standing in front of a mirror, not to judge, but to reflect. You look at your body, your height, your posture, and instead of focusing on whether you're tall enough, small enough, or just right, you ask, what is this form trying to tell me? What energy does it carry? Let's consider someone of above average height. Jung would observe that such a person is not only physically visible, but symbolically elevated. Their presence changes the dynamic of a room. They may embody the archetypes of leadership, protection, or vision, often without trying to. They're given attention by default. Their voice often carries weight. Their gaze seems to reach further, and their body takes up more space. And with this symbolic height may come expectations to lead, to protect, to be strong. But this isn't just about the tall. Consider now someone whose stature is below average. The world often sees them as quieter, more inward, more grounded in presence. Jung might suggest they resonate with the archetypes of adaptability, inner strength, and observation. They may move through life less visibly, but they often move more attuned, noticing shifts others miss, hearing what goes unsaid, and developing deep emotional intelligence through their more subtle engagement with the world. And between these poles, those of average height are often the great balancers. Not imposed upon by extremes, they carry the symbolic capacity for mediation, for adaptability, and for moving fluidly through situations. Their archetypes may be less flashy but more integrative, walking between worlds, finding common ground. Jung's message was never that these traits are caused by height. Rather, he believed that the body, like the psyche, reflects and expresses the deeper energies at work within us. Our stature, then, becomes a kind of psychological poem, a visual metaphor for how we relate to power, visibility, groundedness, and influence. The body's story. In many ways, what Jung gives us is permission to look again, to turn something mundane into something meaningful, to understand that our physical selves are not separate from our spiritual selves. The same energy that creates dreams also shapes how we walk through a room, how we take up space, how we feel when others look up to us, or don't. Your height is not your identity, but it is a clue, a symbol, a part of your personal myth, and in the symbolic map of your life, it can tell you which energies are active, which roles you often assume, and which shadows you may carry without even knowing. Because just as every archetype has a light, it also has a shadow. The tall may bear the burden of expectation. The short may feel the sting of invisibility. The average may struggle with being overlooked or undefined. But within each height lies a path of transformation, a psychological invitation to own your energy fully and consciously. In the sections that follow, we'll explore each of these archetypal energies in depth. The guardian, the elevated presence of the tall, the protector, the seer. The silent guardian, the subtle strength of the grounded. The empath, the quiet guide. The messenger, the adaptable spirit of the average height individual. The voice of balance. The equilibrator, the harmonizer who moves between extremes, integrating both sides. But before we begin, remember, this journey isn't about being categorized. It's about being seen. Seen by yourself, honored for the path you've walked and the energy you carry. In Jung's vision, the body is the soul made visible. And when we start to listen to it, truly listen, we begin to hear the whispers of a deeper truth. You have always been more than your appearance. You have always been a vessel of meaning. Now let's explore what that meaning might be. In the symbolic landscape Carl Jung painted so vividly, our physical bodies are more than vessels. They are story bearers. Your posture, your stance, the simple fact of how tall or grounded you are, all of it is a subtle language the psyche speaks through. For those who move through life with an elevated presence, a body that rises above the average, that language often takes the shape of the guardian. The guardian archetype is one of silent power, not loud, not forceful, but undeniably present. There's a gravity to someone tall, a natural sense of visibility. In a crowded space, they are often noticed first. Their head, quite literally, sits closer to the sky. Their body claims space without effort. And in the Jungian view, this physical elevation may reflect an inner archetype, that of the protector, the seer, the visionary, the symbol of elevation. Symbolically, height has long been tied to perspective. Towers were built to see farther. Mountains became homes to prophets and gods. Even in our everyday language, we speak of rising above, seeing the big picture, or taking the high road. These expressions reflect a deep cultural and psychological association between height and wisdom, clarity or oversight. To be tall in this symbolic framework is to carry not just a body that extends upward, but a psyche that is asked, often silently, to hold the weight of vision and responsibility. Jung might say that a tall individual, by nature of their archetypal presence, is often called into roles of guidance, not because they ask for it, but because others subconsciously assign it to them. They become the friend people go to in crisis, the colleague others look to for direction, the parent or partner whose steadiness sets the tone. Even when quiet, their presence shapes the space around them. And while that power can be beautiful, it can also be heavy. The gifts of the guardian. At their best, those who resonate with the guardian archetype embody a calm authority. They move through life with dignity and thoughtfulness, not needing to prove themselves, because their very presence offers reassurance. Their elevated perspective allows them to see what others often miss. They can take a step back, observe the full system at work. Whether it's a social situation, a workplace dynamic, or an emotional current, and offer insights that cut through the fog. This capacity for vision often makes them wise advisors, trusted leaders, or quiet anchors in times of upheaval. Guardians often exude patience. Like towering trees, they know that strength doesn't rush. They've learned to carry not just themselves, but others too, whether emotionally, psychologically, or spiritually. And in doing so, they often become a pillar for those around them. Yet within these gifts also lies the edge of the archetype, the place where strength can turn into strain. The weight of expectation. Jung taught that every archetype contains a shadow, a hidden, often unconscious side that must be confronted for true integration to occur. For the guardian, this shadow often shows up in the form of burden. The same visibility that grants them presence can also create distance. The tall are often seen before they are known. They may become symbols to others, rather than individuals, admired for their stature, but not always heard for their soul. People may expect them to be leaders, protectors, providers, even if they never consciously chose those roles. Over time, this can lead to a deep fatigue, a sense of being always on, always reliable, always holding the weight of the room. And in moments when they falter, as all humans do, they may feel ashamed or exposed, as if failing to live up to some unspoken role they were never allowed to set down. There is also the risk of becoming emotionally guarded. Guardians may grow accustomed to being the strong one and struggle to ask for help. Their height becomes a metaphor for emotional self-containment, always looking out, but rarely looking in. They may begin to feel lonely at the top, disconnected from the playfulness and vulnerability that exist below the canopy. Healing the guardian. For the guardian archetype to become fully integrated, they must learn to lay down the armor, not permanently, not irresponsibly, but intentionally. In moments of trust and safety, they must remember that true strength includes softness, that they are allowed to be carried sometimes, not just the one who carries. That leadership is not about always knowing. It's about showing up, honestly and humbly, even when unsure. The guardian must also make peace with being seen, not just for their stature but for their story. To step out of the role that others assign and step into the truth of who they are. This may mean turning down a leadership role that doesn't feel aligned, or speaking openly about their own needs, fears, or longings. There's a liberation that comes when the guardian says, "I am more than what you expect of me." And in that moment, the archetype transforms from a burden into a gift freely given, one rooted in authenticity. The quiet presence that anchors. When a guardian fully inhabits their archetype, they don't dominate. They stabilize. Their presence is not about hierarchy. It's about harmony. They create the space in which others feel safe to grow, to speak, to unfold. These are the mentors who speak less but say more. The parents who lead not through fear but through love. The friends who don't rush in with solutions, but offer a silence deep enough to hear truth. Their power is nonverbal, often unassuming, but it changes everything. The guardian reminds us that stature isn't just physical, it's energetic. It's the ability to hold tension without collapse, to stand upright when others crumble, and to offer a high vantage point not from superiority, but from care. And so we begin to see the deeper truth of Jung's insight. That height, symbolic and literal, is not random. It participates in our unfolding. It carries messages, energies, invitations. And for the guardian, that invitation is to lead not from the head, but from the heart. To see far, yes, but also to feel deeply. To protect others, yes, but also to allow themselves to be protected. To stand tall, always, but with a posture shaped by humility, presence, and truth. While the towering guardian may rise above in the silent, guardian may root deeply into the ground. There exists a subtle, balanced space between them. It is here, in this middle ground of human stature, that we encounter the messenger. In Jungian terms, this archetype is not an accident of averages, but a symbolic expression of fluidity, nuance, and communication between polarities. Jung taught that archetypes are not static roles, but living energies. They evolve and express themselves in myriad forms. The messenger, as an archetype, carries the gift of movement between worlds. Not fixed in dominance or invisibility, these individuals often find themselves walking the in-between, socially, emotionally, psychologically, and their average height, in symbolic terms, becomes a metaphor for this flexible position. They are the interpreters, the communicators, the translators of unseen truth. And yet within that gift lies a complex emotional terrain to navigate, the gift of being in between. The world often privileges the extremes. The tallest are praised for their power, the smallest for their resilience. But those in the middle, they're frequently overlooked, their significance diluted by familiarity. And yet, the messenger's true power lies in this subtlety. Not immediately imposing, nor immediately underestimated, they learn early how to adapt, how to read a room, find the emotional undercurrents, and adjust accordingly. They develop what Jung would call a strong feeling function, a sensitivity to emotional tones and social dynamics. This grants them an instinctual ability to navigate complexity, often without drawing too much attention. In many ways, the messenger is the social alchemist, able to blend with many types of people, environments, and ideas. They act as bridges between opposing forces, logic and emotion, introversion and extroversion, tradition and innovation. Because they aren't typecast by their stature, they often learn to move fluidly between roles, able to lead when needed, and to support when it matters most. The archetype of adaptability. Jung believed that the healthiest expression of the psyche is one that honors integration, not the domination of one archetype, but the ability to hold multiple aspects in harmony. The messenger reflects this ideal. Their symbolic height places them in a natural balance, allowing them to access both vision, like the guardian, and groundedness, like the silent guardian, depending on the moment. This gives them the gift of timing. They often know when to speak and when to stay silent, when to guide and when to step back. Their voice may not thunder, but it carries clarity, and often lands with precision. They are not performers. They are responders to the emotional rhythm of life. The messenger can be found in the roles of teachers, therapists, writers, diplomats, and mediators. Anyone who carries messages from one domain to another. They are often able to name what others feel but cannot express. And in that act of articulation, they bring healing, insight, or understanding. But as with every archetype, the messenger too carries a shadow. The chameleon's dilemma. The messenger's fluidity, while powerful, can become a form of self-erasure. When you are so good at adapting, at reflecting others' needs and emotions, you may begin to lose touch with your own voice. You become a mirror for everyone, except yourself. This can lead to a subtle, persistent identity crisis. Who am I? Apart from what others need from me, messengers may feel invisible, not because they are unseen physically, but because their authentic essence gets lost in the roles they shift between. They might suppress their opinions to keep the peace. They may find it easier to reflect someone else's truth than to stand firmly in their own. And over time, this can become exhausting, a constant balancing act, with no solid center. The very archetypal power that allows them to harmonize becomes a trap when it overrides their own emotional clarity. Jung believed that integration requires facing the shadow, and for the messenger, that means making peace with their own need to be seen and heard, not just as a vessel for others' truths, but as a being with a truth of their own, claiming the inner voice. For the messenger to evolve into their full potential, they must undergo a process of differentiation. This means no longer defining themselves solely by what they bring to others, but by what arises authentically within. It's about learning to speak not just fluently, but honestly, to express desires, boundaries, and truths even when they risk disrupting the harmony they've grown accustomed to protecting. This doesn't mean losing their adaptability. It means anchoring it in something deeper, self-awareness. When the messenger develops a strong internal center, they become unstoppable. Their words carry not just empathy, but authentic conviction. Their presence feels both open and grounded, capable of connection, but not at the cost of integrity. They begin to realize that their middle place is not a compromise. It is a power, a symbolic stance that allows them to unite opposites, not because they are neutral, but because they are whole. The power of quiet influence. In the world of noise and spectacle, the messenger reminds us of the power of quiet influence, of listening deeply, of seeing people as they are, of bridging misunderstandings with patience and nuance. They don't need to command the spotlight, because they command something far more lasting: trust. They are often the ones people turn to in private, the friends whose advice resonates long after the conversation ends, the ones who remember the things others forget, the ones who hold space, not to fix but to witness. And in doing so, they become the connective tissue of families, communities, even movements. They may not wear a crown, but they carry a message, a transmission of wisdom, compassion, and clarity that ripples outward, changing lives not through force, but through resonance. Jung might say that these individuals embody the archetype of Hermes, the mythological messenger who moved between realms, divine and mortal, light and shadow, conscious and unconscious. Like Hermes, they are threshold dwellers, and through them, insight passes into form, walking the threshold. Ultimately, the messenger's journey is one of wholeness through articulation. Their symbolic height places them between, and in that between, they learn to embrace complexity, duality, contradiction. They don't have to choose between extremes. They are called to translate between them. To be a messenger is to live with a foot in each world, and to find peace not in clarity alone, but in connection. When they find their voice, they bring light to confusion. When they root themselves in truth, they offer stability in transition. When they claim their own story, they inspire others to do the same. In a time when so much of life feels polarized and fragmented, the messenger is the one who can hold the middle, not as a place of compromise, but as a place of communion. As we arrive at the final dimension of our journey, through Jungian archetypes and the symbolic meaning of height, we now shift our focus to the quietest of the four, not in worth, not in wisdom, but in visible volume. This is the realm of the silent guardian, the individual whose stature places them closer to the earth, but whose energy often reaches further than anyone realizes. If the guardian stands tall in visibility and the messenger weaves between polarities, then the silent guardian embodies the unshakable strength of groundedness. Often overlooked, even underestimated in our culture of height worship and extroverted presence, these individuals carry an archetype rooted in resilience, subtlety, and emotional gravity. In Jungian language, they represent an introverted expression of power, and they are a vital part of the symbolic ecosystem, a symbol of groundedness. Let's return to Jung's central belief. The body reflects the psyche. To be shorter in stature, in symbolic terms, is to live closer to the ground, to gravity, to the body, to the pulse of what is near. While tallness often implies oversight and command, shorter stature can symbolize sensitivity to detail, an ability to move through small spaces with awareness and precision, both literally and metaphorically. The silent guardian does not demand attention, they invite connection. Their strength is not broadcast through volume or dominance, but through a subtle magnetism, the kind that draws people in when they need to feel truly seen. They are often listeners, empaths, watchers of the human soul. Because they are less likely to be handed the mantle of leadership by default, they often cultivate strength from within. They learn early how to influence without imposing, and so they become powerful not in how loudly they speak, but in how deeply they understand. The wisdom of the quiet. Jung valued silence and inner life. He believed that what appears small or humble often contains the greatest symbolic richness. The silent guardian is a reflection of this principle. They hold the energy of the root, the foundation, the unseen thread that keeps others grounded, especially when chaos or ego threatens to unravel a group or relationship. This archetype carries the ancient energy of caretakers, herbalists, monks, archivists, and those who pass down truths in quiet rooms. Their contributions are often missed in the moment, but deeply felt over time. They may not be the first person to speak in a group, but when they do, their words are anchored in thoughtfulness and carry lasting weight. Because they live lower to the literal and symbolic ground, they are often more attuned to emotional shifts, physical discomforts, and intuitive signals. In a world that rewards high visibility, they develop an inner radar that catches what others miss. They become the ones who remember how someone was feeling last week, who sense tension in a conversation before it erupts, who know without being told when someone needs a moment of kindness. This is not magical thinking. It is the result of years, sometimes lifetimes, spent paying attention from the margins. The archetype of quiet strength. The silent guardian knows the power of stillness. Where others might rush in with solutions, they wait. They hold space. They protect not with volume, but with presence. They may not wear a title, but people turn to them when life becomes overwhelming. And when they speak, they often express a distilled truth that others could not find on their own. Jung would have seen this archetype as lunar rather than solar. Reflective, intuitive, inward. They embody the yin principle, cool, nurturing, receptive, and resilient. And in a world obsessed with the sun, these moonlit beings offer balance. But this too comes with a shadow, the pain of being overlooked. Just as the tall may struggle with expectation, and the messenger with identity, the silent guardian often wrestles with visibility, or more precisely, the lack of it. They may feel passed over in public settings, overshadowed in leadership spaces, or underestimated in relationships. They may struggle with the sense that no one sees what they carry, that their insight, care, and effort go unnoticed because it is not delivered with grandeur. This can lead to feelings of bitterness, withdrawal, or self-doubt. They may wonder if their quieter path is one of deficiency rather than design. If the world only rewards those who speak loudly or take up space, what does that mean for someone whose presence is soft? This is the heart of the silent guardian's shadow. The belief that subtlety is invisibility, that humility is powerlessness, that softness is a flaw. Jung would challenge that belief. He would say that to be unseen by the crowd does not mean you are unseen by the soul, that what is quiet is often closer to the unconscious, and therefore more connected to universal truths. That the small flame, tended carefully, burns longer than the wildfire. The sacred role of the silent guardian. The journey of the silent guardian is to reclaim their own visibility, not necessarily in the eyes of others, but in their own inner vision. They must recognize that their archetypal strength lies not in commanding the room, but in understanding its undercurrent. They are the keepers of nuance, the healers of fracture, the ones who tend to the psychological soil beneath the surface. Without them, systems become brittle. Relationships become performative. Leadership becomes hollow. When the silent guardian claims their value, they no longer try to be louder. They become deeper. They anchor. And in doing so, they offer the world what it so often lacks. Stillness, clarity, and a sense of emotional safety. Strength in stillness. A society that values showmanship may miss the brilliance of the silent guardian. But Jung would argue that true transformation rarely begins in the spotlight. It begins in the depths, in the inner world, the subtle conversation, the moment of still presence. The silent guardian teaches us that the ground is holy, that resilience doesn't have to roar, that influence can move through small gestures, a knowing glance, a hand on the shoulder, a sentence spoken at the exact right moment. They are the reminder that even in a world of noise, silence is still sacred. Integration in the symbolic body. And so we've walked through the symbolic spectrum of height, not as a biological feature to be judged, but as a symbolic imprint, a doorway into the archetypal energies we carry. The guardian, whose elevated stature reflects a calling toward vision and leadership, and whose path is to balance strength with vulnerability. The messenger, whose central position symbolizes adaptability, fluidity, and the call to speak with clarity, while anchoring in authenticity. The silent guardian, whose grounded presence reveals the power of subtlety, depth, and emotional resilience, and whose healing lies in knowing they are already enough. And the equilibrator, the harmonizer of tension, walking the path of balance in a world drawn to extremes, a symbol of quiet integration. Jung would not want you to be limited by these archetypes. He would invite you to inhabit them, to explore which patterns feel familiar and which feel aspirational. To see not just your height, but your stance in relationships, in decisions, in life itself, as a message from your soul. Your body is not just an object. It is a mirror, a metaphor, a message waiting to be interpreted. And in doing so, you reclaim a kind of power. The power to understand your life not as random, but as a living myth, with symbols, characters, and meanings woven through every thread, including how tall you stand, how deeply you listen, and how you carry yourself through the world. So whether you rise above, dwell near the roots, or find yourself balanced in the middle, remember, your posture is also your path. Your height is not who you are, but it might be how your soul first began to whisper its story. And now the question returns to you. What archetype do you walk with? And are you ready to meet it fully?